From Classical WETA in Washington, we take you behind the music. In this episode, the Abeo String Quartet gives a performance of a new work by Alistair Coleman called Moonshot. Alistair talks about the inspiration for this new work, and after the performance, we talk with the Abeo Quartet about putting this piece together, new playing techniques, and space travel. They're an award-winning quartet made up of students from Juilliard, and they're already touring internationally. Welcome back, Alistair. It's always great to have you here, but you aren't alone this time. It looks like you've brought some backup. Who is this?
I certainly have. This is the Abeo Quartet, comprised of some of my friends from Juilliard who are coming to D.C. to play a piece of mine at the new Glenstone Museum.
And what I'm really excited for, because in this episode, we're going to be hearing a new piece that you just wrote for string quartet called Moonshot.
Right. Yeah, it was commissioned by the Glenstone Museum. It started from my first visit to Glenstone just about a year ago. You know, being in that space, I was struck by the art, and you know, coming from a musician, I didn't really have much of a connection to visual art. But coming to Glenstone, I was really struck not only by the art, but just also the way through which it is presented. You know, the architecture is just so beautiful, and these natural surroundings that they have intentionally created it's just so beautiful.
The piece Moonshot is inspired by a triptych, right, of this artist, Ankawara. And he's this conceptual artist, and if you aren't familiar, we'll definitely have on the show notes page at classicalbreakdown.org links or pictures to this art, which is so interesting because he works with dates. That's what he was mostly known for. He'd create a painting, and that painting would be a date with a black background, typically with these ones, and a white date on it, and they'd be painted on that date. And if it wasn't finished by that day, you know, that was it. He trashed it.
Basically, yeah, you destroy it.
So when you saw this piece by Ankawara, you were inspired to write something about this, especially being about space, because you and your family are self-described space nerds.
We are space geeks, yes,
Yeah.
Self-proclaimed space geeks. Yeah, I mean the art. I mean, just being in that space, I actually saw that art previously in the Guggenheim a couple years ago. So it was kind of like a homecoming in a way, in seeing that art in that space. But also, you know, all of these intersections between visual art and the historical significance of that, of the Apollo 11 mission to the moon, and also, again, the space geek thing, it just became clear to me that I just had to write a piece about it.
So was it kind of like over time this kind of brewed up that you wanted to write something for, or was it almost like you saw this and you really thought, this has some impact, I really need to write something for this?
Yeah, I remember being in the car home thinking this would be really, really cool. And I mean, specifically, I envisioned, you know, a work for strings. I kind of based this experience on a violin concerto that I wrote, and then kind of took those ideas and also added some more material as well to create a brand new work for string quartet, which I wrote specifically for the Abeo Quartet. I approached a team at Glenstone and pitched to them if we could maybe do the premiere at the museum, so we can kind of bring home the piece, so to speak, and be able to create the connection between the music and the inspiration for that music. So they were receptive to the idea, and we actually just premiered the piece this weekend.
So the artwork by Ankawara, specifically here, it's 3 paintings, and it's 3 dates that are shown. You've got July 16, 1969, July 20, 1969, and then July 21st, 1969. And how do these fit within the music?
Yeah, so these dates are significant to the Apollo 11 moon landing, and these are, again, as you mentioned, Ankawara created these works on those very days. So when you're in that space and knowing that these works were created during that time, kind of you feel frozen in a moment in time, so to speak. It almost feels like you're looking at artifacts from those very days, and that kind of gave me a window into looking more into the historical significance. And again, when I was in that space, I just conjured all of these photos and videos and stories that I've seen and heard from the mission. So I with this piece, I wanted to structure it through those canvases. So the first movement is actually titled July 16th, 1969. And on that day, the Saturn V rocket launched into the sky. So the movement that I wrote is just very fast and forward moving, very fiery. And, you know, these guys just play so incredibly, just with so much excitement and so much energy. And then the second movement, July 20th, is the day that man first stepped on the moon. But I really wanted to start that movement with kind of capturing like the beauty of space travel in a way, and also the solitude too. I mean, I just imagined the lunar capsule just kind of orbiting the moon, just trying to imagine what that would feel like, and also then all of that leading up to that moment of landing on the moon. And then finally, the third movement, July 21st, 1969. I really wanted to bring the piece or the scope of the piece back home, back to Earth, and really kind of draw from an article, news clipping that Anquara included with that specific canvas. It's a New Yorker magazine talk of the town, and it captures stories of people throughout New York City who were all tuning in to the moon landing and reflecting on what happened, or how they felt, or where they were. And I just loved how that exemplified, people from all backgrounds throughout the world, all tuning in, all celebrating, all reflecting together on such a milestone in American, if not human, history.
All right, so let's hear it. This is the Abeo Quartet performing Moonshot by Alistair Coleman. Fantastic.
Very good, yeah.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll hear from Alistair and from the Abeo Quartet more on this piece. Classical Breakdown is made possible by Classical WETA. Join us for the music anytime, day or night. To listen live, just go to our website, classicalweta.org, or download our app. It's free in the App Store. Congratulations, Alistair. It's an amazing piece, Moonshot. You hear so much, of course, writing for space and that theme in music isn't new, but listening to this, it sounds like it's a different take, a different angle. It sounds fresh. It sounds different than what is kind of like the stereotype. And I just think it's just refreshing and fantastic.
Oh, thanks, John. I appreciate it.
I do have one question, though. In the final few minutes, after this kind of big, resolute, kind of semi-ending, and then it goes into what sounds like a hymn or like an anthem. And knowing you, that you're a singer, you grew up here in Washington singing in one of the church choirs, if that is something that you were trying to incorporate, a hymn or an anthem towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, with this third movement, this was actually it was the most difficult to write, and it was the most hastily written, I think. But the central idea that I had for this movement was a chorale, because there's just something about at least my idea of what a chorale is. It's this idea of bringing people together in a way, and all kind of singing, like the idea of homophonic music. All it's one. I'm just trying to think of this entire world all tuning in, and all kind of together, just experiencing something at the same time. I just thought of this idea, and it's also very reflective. Like when you think of chorales in larger forms, it usually is representing something somewhat reflective. So that movement has its kind of exciting moments and very fast moments, but I think towards the beginning and towards the end, I really wanted to include that chorale, just kind of represent that idea of reflection and what people were thinking about during that time.
Well, let's bring in the quartet now, the Abeo Quartet. We have on violin Ludwig Gudum and Ngioma Grievous, and on viola James Kang, and on cello Drew Cohn. You guys, that was absolutely amazing, that performance.
Thank you so much.
What was it like putting this piece together?
I think what's different from the other pieces that we've played is that this time we actually had the opportunity to work with the composer, because we spent so much time in rehearsal really thinking about what the composer wanted and what he felt during the time of writing it. And it was really a privilege to have the composer of the piece in the room with us, where he could explain that for us.
That's always helpful.
Yeah. Always helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm actually wondering, did any of you see this artwork that was the inspiration for this? Did you guys actually see this before you even played this?
Yeah, actually, I was here with Alistair. We went to the museum, I think sometime in December last year, and I got a very good look at the work, and I just think it's amazing how he linked the visual art to this piece of music, and I really appreciated having that connection to people in the museum who are visual artists or who like going to museums with visual art, because usually we don't really connect with those people.
So Ngioma saw it beforehand. What about you guys?
All new for us.
All new.
Yeah.
So maybe the first time you saw this was actually the other day, right before you premiered the work, seeing for the first time in person?
Yes.
And what was your impression when you first saw it?
I guess the first thing that strikes you about the artwork is the scale and the vastness of the room that it's in. There's a sense of magnitude that I haven't really experienced with other installations of visual art that I've ever experienced. And walking in there, you're surrounded by these bold statements, and it kind of forces you into a certain state of mind that I think is very powerful and captivating in a way. And it was immediate to me why Alistair would write something for this, feeling that feeling.
And as Alistair is saying, the space idea of travel and everything, it really unites everyone into, it's this amazing thing. It's the next, whatever frontier for humanity. And when I was in school, they were winding down the space shuttle program, and I think for you guys there was no program at all. But now you see this big push, with SpaceX and things like that. I'm wondering for you, coming wherever you're coming from, what is this idea of going into space like? I'm sure it's very different than decades past.
It's an interesting question. I have to think about that for a
Does
second.
anybody want to go to space?
I don't.
Yeah,
I'm too scared.
Space scares me.
I thought I wanted to be an astronaut, especially because, again, my family are total space geeks. And I actually went when I must have been 5 years old or 6 years old. And my family we drove down to Cape Canaveral and saw the space shuttle launch. I think it was an Endeavour. And I still remember it to this day, just that, even though I was so young, just being so incredibly far away from the launch pad, of course, and just seeing this teeny tiny little speck in the distance, but hearing those rocket boosters, I don't know what the technical term is, but it felt like it was right in front of your face, even though you were, at least a mile or two away.
Yeah, and what I think is really cool is in the first movement of Alistair's piece, even though I've never seen a space shuttle go into space, I can really picture that in my mind, and that's what I think is really incredible about his writing.
What was the most difficult part about putting this piece together?
Do we have half an hour to talk about it?
The Cliff Notes version, without getting into a fight.
There are many different complicated rhythms, but those were fixed right away, I guess. But there were things like different extending techniques that we had never seen before, different markings that we had never been experienced with, and so it was so good to have him right there so we could just ask him, and it was fixed right away. So not many things too difficult.
And Alistair is not a string player, and there were some measures that were just impossible to play. So we were also actually a part of the editing process, which was pretty cool.
That's the best part about working with performers in general, but also performers who are my age, and also, I'm really grateful to call my friends, that it's you can have such an open dialogue when you're going back and forth with a new piece. And for me, this process of working with this quartet and also, each individual player has just been one of the greatest experiences for me ever, just because of how brilliant they are, but also just how open and how, they're just there to help in a way. So I'm just so grateful to them for all their work on it.
Yeah. James, actually, I want to ask you a question about something you just said. When you mentioned extended technique, you're referring to how there's things that are written to play on the violin that aren't standard.
Yes.
And so what are some of these extended techniques? What did Alistair make you do in some of this?
One example is when we, the viola and the cello have this marking that gets, it's a bold line that gets thicker, and it means that as it gets thicker, the sound has to be more distorted. And so you go close to the bridge and you make a nasty sound. It's not supposed to be pretty at all.
And the bridge is that part, kind of the last place you can play on the instrument. Is that called Ponticello?
Yes, so nearing a Ponticello sound, yes.
And you get that kind of grinding, distorted sound.
Yeah.
And that's the fun thing within the music. It's beautiful in its own way. It's not this super ugly thing that is, offensive.
Mm-hmm. Actually, and I think, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he did want to place that in the third movement, in the fast section, so that it would pop out and kind of throw off the rhythm, and it gets right back in to the theme of that fast movement.
What were some of the most surprising things about putting this together?
Good question.
Well, how long did you have to work on this?
I think we had around 2 weeks, something like that.
At most.
Yeah.
I sent the first two movements to them in draft form over the summer, just even though the quartet was not together, because over the summer you guys are at different festivals and things like that. But the third movement I sent probably 2 weeks before the performance, I think.
Wow.
Am I wrong?
No.
No.
At least we didn't start working on it before.
And they're all glaring at you.
We were scared at first because Alistair, he doesn't hold back. It's quite a difficult technically piece and to put together. So 2 weeks before, it seemed like something monumental, kind of impossible to conquer. But every day we figured out more and more, and then something clicked, and the piece started to not only fit together technically, but we started to really feel an insight emotionally to which parts he was trying to convey certain characters. And once that started being part of our process, the piece started speaking to us more, and we started liking it more, and then we worked on it harder, and it was just this snowball effect, and I think that's why it turned out so well.
For me, one part of this piece that I think lots of us haven't experienced before, mostly because we don't really improvise, or usually everything's written out and in time, is just the first part of the first movement, which is pretty spontaneous, I would say, which I guess kind of reminds me of like space. Like, it's kind of fantastical and magical, and you don't really, things pop up when you look out the space shuttle, out of nowhere. And I thought that aspect of his piece was actually very surprising to me because, we're not used to that, and I think that we adapted to it very well, and now this sort of call and then response, or call and echo between first violin and the three strings is, really become a part of us, and it's super fun to play. I'd say that's one of my favorite parts of the piece at this point.
Was it pretty hard putting it together at first? I don't think I was there for the first couple rehearsals.
This first part?
Yeah.
We didn't even touch the
Yeah.
first part
Yeah,
until
we-
Yeah, we were
until
scared.
had a rehearsal with you.
Yeah, I think it was like NGO was saying how new the technique was. We were so baffled by it that we just like, okay, let's do the part that we know that we can play, and then let's ask him what this means.
You just have to follow your heart. You have to follow the like urge to play the next note.
Like instinct?
Yeah, the instinct to play the next note, and so it sounds, not artificial, so it sounds natural. And I think we've come to a place where we feel it naturally, and it's really nice.
But that's the beauty of working with a quartet like this, is that they're so in tune with each other that writing something that where instinct is so incredibly important and needed in just blatantly, so to speak, that they can just still play so incredibly just together and in tune with one another, and that's been a really, really fun thing to work with, especially with this group of people.
So, you've been in Washington for a few days performing basically nonstop. You're headed back to New York soon. What's next for the Abeo Quartet?
We're actually going to my home country in a couple of weeks. There's and they call it the Absolute Haydn Festival, where all is it 68 Haydn quartets will be performed over 20 something hours nonstop. So we'll be playing seven of the Haydn quartets there. So we're very excited about.
And that'll be back in Norway.
Yeah, that's
a nice
in,
homecoming for you.
Yes, yeah, it'll be so special for me to bring three of my best friends there and to be able to perform in my in Oslo, my capital city.
Well, Ludwig, Ngioma, James, Drew, thank you so much. You guys sound absolutely fantastic. And Alistair, congratulations on this brand new piece. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for listening to Classical Breakdown. For more information on the artwork that inspired this piece, Alistair Coleman, the Abeo Quartet, and more, visit the show notes page at classicalbreakdown.org. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review in your podcast app. I'm John Banther. Thanks for listening to Classical Breakdown from Classical WETA.